Yeah.
Today on Arash's World, we have a very special guest, Jorge Ulnik, who is the recipient of the Sigourney Award this year. And congrats, and welcome to Arash's World.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be in this podcast and this famous program.
Thank you so much. So I would like to get started with, if you can just introduce yourself. How would you describe yourself in brief terms? What would you say?
Well, I'm a doctor, a physician, but dedicated to psychoanalysis and psychiatry. But the subject that from the very beginning I was interested about is the psychosomatics. So my question always is why people get sick, apart from the bacteria or the physical etiologies or causes. And usually when we learn to listen and to be close to the patients, we understand that diseases appear intertwined with life events and emotions. So I dedicated all my career to psychosomatics. Inside psychosomatics, or within this subject, the destiny of who knows what leads me to the skin, and I started working with skin patients in a discipline named psychodermatology. In psychodermatology, psychotherapists work together with dermatologists and professionals dedicated to the skin. But I am a psychoanalyst, so the difference between other psychiatrists working with skin patients is that I believe that there are unconscious factors that influence or take part in the evolution, in the medical response of the diseases to the treatment. Or there are some trigger factors that appear in these kind of problems. So, well, I started working at a hospital in the liaison psychiatry, which means the psychiatry dedicated to consultations that all the different specialists, doctors that work at the hospital sometimes ask for help to a psychiatrist that with the aim to work together to help patients. And I learned a lot of interdisciplinary teams in which I worked, and especially with skin patients.
I'm a huge fan of interdisciplinary studies and connecting things, and especially psychoanalysis. I think the connection, it can be applied to anything, whether it's arts, literature, movies, as well as philosophy, as well as medicine. And for me, a great game changer was when I read Susan O'Sullivan's book. She's a neurologist. She wrote a book, It's All in Your Head, and she wrote about psychosomatic disorders. And that was a game changer for me, the importance of the relationship between the mind and body, and the importance of really understanding the root problem of one's physical disease. And it's not physical, it is psychological, as with psychosomatic diseases. And it changed my perspective. And it's actually quite common, because they say a lot of people who go and see their family physician, they are most likely suffering from psychosomatic diseases, but they're not treated as such. And they're also afraid of accepting that, because they say, what are you saying? I am a crazy person. There's that stigma attached to it. So I love it that you as a physician are bridging those two together and combining them. And this is what the award is about too, of like bringing psychoanalysis to all the other disciplines that fit in with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have said something very common and very important in the clinic, which is that patients, when they are referred to a psychoanalyst or to psychotherapy, they feel that they are treated as a second-class patient, not a first class one, and they feel like a passenger that enters into a plane, and the first part of the path, the narrow path to go to the seat, first pass through the business class, watching the big chairs and comfortable places in which this patient or this passenger will not be placed. He has to go through this place and to the ordinary chairs. So when the patient goes to a specialist and he or she refers the patient to a psychotherapist, usually the patient changes the dermatologist. Not he or she doesn't go to the psychotherapist. They change the dermatologist and sometimes feel offended because feel treated as a crazy person. So the first thing that we, the psychotherapists, should do is not waiting the patient to come to us, but we go into the patient and, for example, in a clinic or in a hospital, go into the dermatology service to work in that place and trying to transmit to the patient that all of us, you and me and everyone we know, we are skin patients. No one is safe to have a pimple or acne in the youth, or, for example, hair loss or blister or anything that are very common sufferings or little problems of the skin. So all of us are skin patients. But what means to be a skin patient? Well, to be a skin patient means, first of all, to feel marked, like having a stain or a mark, and feeling uncomfortable. Why? Because having a problem on the skin is like wearing a suit or something, or an outfit that is itchy or doesn't fit because it's very short or it's very large or has a hole. Many things that affect at least two things. One, the own image, and second, the sensation of being us, being ourselves. Because every stain, every lesion, every, for example, scale or redness affect our image and makes us to feel that we are not ourselves. And we become an object of the gaze of others. So the next sensation, very common, is not only to feel marked or uncomfortable, but to be seen. And if the skin is a big disease, is for example, a very severe skin disease, the sensation is to feel given to be seen. So to be in front of millions of eyes.
Yes. And I think it's very fascinating. And for me, I did not really think about skin and psychoanalysis. So I am impressed that you combine them. But when I thought about it, it makes perfect sense. And so just the idea of face too it's quite interesting that our face is unique. And that's what we are showing and projecting into the world. And there's also the changes of now, mostly also through technology. So we see each other, but we lack the human touch. And if we look at in terms of language that shows here ideas of skin, or for example, stay in touch, losing touch, like there's a lot of language that's connected to it. Shedding your skin, or again, scarred for life, we say. And that's exactly what you're talking about, that kind of mark on your face, or like Cain's kind of mark in the Bible, who's like scarred for life. And it is so important, our face. And how has that, how does, again, affect people, again, like you're saying, the gaze of the others and the awareness, self-awareness of the face itself, which is skin, exactly.
Well, but first of all, for you mentioned the actual situation in which we are losing the contact or the touch because of the COVID pandemic, and because the World Health Organization advise us to avoid contact and to maintain a preventive distance among us or between each other. And the point is that if we are not touched, we replace our touching with our eyes. So we looked at whatever we can't touch, because the vision elongs or make longer to reach what we can't reach with our skin. But if we can't touch, we overcharge the gaze, and we become more and more images, and we develop more the drive. Freud mentioned the importance of drives, and we have a touching drive, but we also have a drive to see. So, caused by this problem, we overcharge the drive to see in the place of the drive to touch, and we become an human being, or we feel our existence if we are seen. And we spend all the time in front of the screen, in front of the cell phone, the iPad, Instagram, videos. So I appreciate a lot that you develop so much the podcast, because the podcast permits us to exist through what we call the audience. So it's an auditive link. And this is very important. For example, as I am a psychoanalyst, we the psychoanalysts tried with skin patients to cancel a little bit the pregnance or the predominance of the image, and to recover the contact by the sound, by our voice. For example, if a patient comes and tries in the first moment of the consultation to show, I usually tell, well, show to the dermatologist. This is very important. The dermatologist needs to see your lesions. But here with me, try to talk. I will listen to you. Then if you want, you show. But first, talk. And then no one tries to show after talking.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So we change the channel as in a train. When we travel by train, there is a machine or a controller that switches something that changes the channel, the path of the train, of the wagons.
It reminds me also the original conception that Freud had of like being on the couch, and it's the voice that they would hear and not, again, the visual contact, like you're saying. I want to get back to the face too, because there are two things I want to mention and talk about here. One, the face is a screen, because it's a screen of our emotions. And so when people say they don't believe in mind-body relationships, I say, well, what happens when you're ashamed, when you're happy, when you're excited, when you're stressed, when you're scared, and our skin color changes. And
Yes.
so that's one screen, but then it's also people trying to change that screen and manipulating it by, in a way, putting on makeup, which is a more natural form, but also changing like the lighting, changing things, photoshopping on social media. So that idea of the face as a screen, what would you say about that? What would you comment on this idea?
Well, in some of my lectures or classes, I mentioned that the body image is composed by many things. One is the sense of perception, the physical sense of perception. For example, we have receptors of the position of the body in the space. We have even very little stones in the ear, inside the ear, that gives us information of the position of the head in the space. And when they are out of place, we suffer from dizziness. Well, so sense of perception is one of the elements. The other one are the words, because when we are babies, our mother especially teaches us to talk, and we listen to the mother, we learn the words. And at the beginning, we only know how to speak 2 or 3 words, and we name all things with 1 or 2 words. But progressively, we are acquiring more and more vocabulary. And the third element is the image, especially the face, And the image should be similar to us. For example, one of the problems with the skin diseases is that the lesion, the red lesion, or the shape of the lesion makes the other no similar. We can't mirror ourselves when the image of the body of the other is completely different. We say, people say, not the doctors, but ordinary people say that someone is in alive flesh. I don't know in English, how do you say, but in Spanish is carne viva.
Yeah, flesh, yeah, I think that's the closest.
Because it's the flesh without the cover, which is the skin. No? Well, but the problem is that the 3 elements that I have mentioned should be combined, making a whole, which is our symbolic mirror. But if they are not well combined, for example, because the mother was not a good translator of our primitive words or sensations, or if the face of our mother doesn't correspond to our emotions. So, for example, she's angry, or she's with a psychopathology, or she fears something and has a face of terror. The babies or the little children mirror this image, and they consider always that this is caused by themselves. So if my mother has a terror face, maybe I'm dangerous, or maybe I'm bad in some sense. So the reflex of the faces plays an important role in the composition of the body image. Well, but if the words or the capability of integrate and feel their own sensations is diminished, or is with some problem, somatic problem or psychological problem, we try to recover and to have existence and to be ourselves only linking with only one of the three elements, not words, not sense of perception, only image. And I usually use many advertising of laboratories that promote some creams and products to dermatologists, because I go to the dermatology congresses. And I spend a lot of time in the kiosks, in the stands of the laboratories, watching the advertisings, because they emit messages together with the drug, together with the product. And for example, there is one that says, image is everything.
I remember that, yeah.
And I usually end my lectures showing this, because the advertising says, image is everything, showing a very beautiful young woman. No? So I show this, and then I show the image of the football player Beckham. Beckham is a famous soccer player, English one. And the sentence in this image is, nothing is impossible. So I say, if image is everything and nothing is impossible, what can we do when we have a problem or something that is impossible for us? Because we all know that many things are impossible. We are not omnipotent. So if something is a problem for us and image is everything, what can we do? What can we do if our image is distorted by a pimple or an acne or the hair loss? So the only solution is another advertising which shows a man which is hiding inside a shell. So if image is everything and nothing is impossible, the only way to survive is to make a shell, to make an armor, and to be a sort of knight, but a knight hidden inside the armor.
So we see that it changes, and what you're saying is absolutely true. And the image of what is beautiful changes. The image of what is accepted, it changes. So in the past, we would say pale people, that is something you want to have. And it's like white skin. But then you look at, no, beauty is to have dark tones of skin, to be suntanned. And so that changes also in terms of the body. What are we looking for? A beautiful image. And it would be a plumper woman in the past, and now more skinny. And that is something that's happening. And I think that is a real problem, because we are projecting things into the world that is not us. And that, when you talk about not correspondence, so that people in social media give this impression of a happy family, when inside, when you go into the room in the real life, is not happy at all. And
inside the house is the skeleton in the car.
Exactly. And we fall for this because we take it at face value. This is another expression with face. We take it at face value because we think this is the real image. And because image is everything, we take it as absolute truth, but it's not at all.
Well, if you give me the time, I can give you a movie, an example taken from a movie which is very popular, so maybe
sure, yeah, let's hear it. I love movies.
The movie is not an intellectual one, not a philosophical one. It's a movie, it's a thriller with Sylvester Stallone. In Spanish, it was called Total Risk, but in English, it was another title. It is about people who climb mountains, and they have to go from a high mountain to another one in an harness and hanging from a cable, from a wire, no? Mm-hmm. And one of them is a man who has a problem in the leg, but he has a beautiful girlfriend, no? And the girlfriend is with Sylvester Stallone, and she has to cross the Avai between one risk to the other. And Sylvester Stallone says to her, look at me, look at my face, be sure, be calm, there is no danger, but there is a very deep Avai in, under her body, no? And she fears a lot, she's very scared. But he insists, look at me, look at me, look at my face. She starts the process, no? And in the middle, the harness fails, and she ends hanging from the belt in a very unstable situation and very near to fall and die. And there is very interesting how the face of Sylvester Stallone changes, and he starts to sweat, sweat. Mm-hmm. And the face of his is inverted because he starts to go to rescue her. Mm-hmm. And finally, she starts to fall, and he tries to take her from the using his hand, in which he has a glove. But progressively, very slowly, the glove is going out his hand, and finally she falls and dies. And this is in the beginning of the film, and all the spectators are surprised because a North American movie doesn't go like this, with a failure in the beginning and the beautiful girl dies, no? But it shows how there is a connection between the image of the face and the attachment of the hand. So the eyes and the skin.
And I think the film is called Cliffhanger.
Exactly, Cliffhanger, exactly.
Yeah. And
this
actually, what it brings to mind another film I've seen that really moved me and actually affected me, which I found was a true horror film, was Pedro Almodovar's The Skin I Live In. Yes. For me, that was terrifying. Like, they make horror movies, but the real horror is what he's presenting there. That's somebody else's skin altogether. And so I found that fascinating and, again, truly scary. And I think a lot of people are doing that in a way. This is their life. And I was wondering also what you think about tattoos, people who get tattoos. What's the drive for that? Is that a drive for a change, or what would you say about tattoos in general?
Well, two things. First Almodovar, then the tattoos. Sure. I made an edition of Almodovar's films because Almodovar has a huge material, a huge stuff to work the relationship between the skin and the psyche. And in The Skin I Live In, what is very interesting is that the doctor, who is a psychopath, the doctor, yes, Antonio Banderas is the actor, he is a person who was cheated on his identity because his mother gave him to another mother, and she told that she was the maid, not the mother of his. And also he has a brother who was not recognized, and he has a mourning, not processes mourning, with his wife that died in an accident. So he tries to solve all this trauma, producing an super skin, a skin that protects from everything. No sé, how do you say undestroyed skin, impossible to destroy.
Yeah, indestructible, yeah.
Indestructible skin. So it shows a very common mechanism of using the skin as a result of a not elaborated trauma and mourning process. Well, and now about the tattoos. People, well, first of all, tattoos are not bad. No, I don't think that tattoos is a symptom of psychopathology. No. Could be a fashion, could be a way to show, could be an art production. So there are many ways to interpret and to consider the tattoos. And it's not the same a person who tattoos a butterfly, a little butterfly in the shoulder, or a person who tattoos the complete body. It's not the same. So we can't generalize tattooed people as if they were all a consistent and homogeneous group. But for example, once there was a burn in a discotheque in Buenos Aires, in which a lot of young people died, completely burned. And the relatives of them, many of them, decide to tattoo the name of the dead relative. And when there is an anthropologist that dedicated her thesis about the survivors, the people who survived, and the relatives of the victims of this accident. This anthropologist found that the people who survived said, I can't tell in words what happened. So I was there, I saw there, I tried to rescue my relative, my son, my daughter, my siblings. I couldn't, but I want to tell the world forever what I feel and what happened there. So my tattoo narrates, it's a narrative that narrates what happened there forever, everywhere, and to anyone who wants to read or to listen or to see the tattoo. So the tattoo is a part of a chrono role. It's because it is maintained forever.
That's it, yes.
The second is that the tattoo narrates something. It tells, it says something. And is something that the owner of the tattoo can't say with words. But when we talk about skin disorders, this is not normal, this is a pathology, but always sometimes is a way to narrate something that doesn't have words to be narrated, to be told. There is a song of Annie Lennox that I like a lot, and she says that children are longing for love, but sometimes they ask for something that can't be told. And of course, they tell this with redness or with modifications of the skin or crying, no? Well, I think that tattoos are a transitional or something that is in the middle of the physiological reaction of the skin and the pathological lesions of the skin. The tattoos are in the middle. Sometimes are very healthy and sometimes are not.
Mhm. So the two things about tattoos that fascinated me in a way, and one of them is the permanence, because you say it's something that's permanent. And for me, that is scary, because if that is how I'm feeling now, and what if I change? Because I think our personalities change. I'm not the same person I was before the pandemic. I shed my skin. I got rid of my skin. I'm a very different person than I was a couple of years ago. But the second thing is also the on the skin itself, the effects that the ink, using the ink, something that's permanent, the cutting, does that have a negative effect on the skin? Are there any like side effects related to dangers as well, related to having a tattoo?
Well, actually, a tattoo is an injury to the skin. When you tattoo your skin, you damage your skin. And it's like a scar, for example. But well, the same happens when we put an ear in in a little girl, no? It's a damage to the ear, but tolerated or socially acceptable. The social acceptance plays an important role in many things. Because if you go to the, I don't know, in Africa or in primitive or tribes, that they make a lot of tattoos or modifications on the skin, and it's completely accepted instead of being a damage to the skin.
And we see that shift too, because it's like before it was tattoos, criminals have tattoos, and now it's, as you say, it's become more socially accepted. So these trends also go with the time. So what might have been seen as something that would be considered disorder years ago is seen as perfectly acceptable now, and it should have been perfectly acceptable to begin with in many cases.
Well, originally, only sailors and people in jail had tattoos because they miss their loved ones, or the places in which they were only for a while, and they want to they search the permanency, they reach the permanency through the tattoos.
When they change,
actually, everyone wants the permanency of the loved one. For example, children want the permanency of their mother when they are very little children. And they suffer when the mother goes to work or go out or goes to the bed to sleep with their husband and not with the baby. We have to learn that things are temporary, even life is temporary. It's a pity, but life is temporary.
Yes, there's not much we can do. But going back to the technology and kind of skin together, the idea of avatars, what do you think of an avatar skin? Because we call it a skin too. And so do you think that, how does it affect people? Is it like part of the avatar that they choose? Would that give us a lot of clues about their personality, who they would like to be? Or do we get a lot of information from what avatars they choose in, say, games or video games and so on?
The avatars in games.
Yeah.
Well, the avatar, Freud wrote an article about what he called the doubles. The avatar is a double of the person. And the double just plays a role in the sensation of permanency or finitude is correct? The word finitude?
Finite?
Endiness.
Yeah,
to
finite.
end.
Things are, finite. Things are finite. They will have a finish. They will have an end. Finite.
Finite.
Yeah, like infinite and finite.
Okay, so what Freud said is that we have a love for ourselves called narcissism. And the narcissism that comes from the very beginning is threatened by the real life, because the real life starting with the negative of parents, when our parents say, no, don't do that. If you do that, you will be punished. So it affects our narcissism because we can't do whatever we want. But if we build a double, the double can is a superhero, or could be a killer, or has 10 lives. And we can lose 1, 2, 3. It doesn't matter because the avatar has more lives.
I love that. I think that's absolutely fascinating. When I'm thinking of double too, I'm thinking about how we're wearing masks now, and that's become commonly accepted. But when I was thinking about masks, it used to be bank robbers, but it's also superheroes. So you have that double of like people wearing a mask either to hide their identity because they're criminals, or to hide their identity because they're superheroes and they don't want to be found out. And even now, when I wear a mask in a bank, I feel self-conscious because that's not, if I did that 3 years ago, it was seen as odd, and maybe they would even alert the police. Why is this person wearing a mask? But yes, now, if you're not wearing it, that's when they alert the police. So it's kind of interesting how, again, things change and our perception of masks change in different settings now.
Yes, in the future, it's a very interesting subject of research, how wearing masks will affect the development of the body image in the new generations, because babies are watching their mothers with masks, and they go to the children garden with masks. So in a place where they learn how to interact with peers,
yeah,
with peers, the peer, the image of the peer is hidden under the mask. Yes, it's a very interesting subject.
With adults, a conversation, when I'm wearing a mask, I tell people I am actually smiling right now because, but I'm wondering like how we can maybe like become more perceptive, because we will focus maybe more on the eyes. And so the expression of the eyes, and we can get through the glance, we can get the information, this person is joking, or this person is happy or is smiling. Do you think there could be some sort of like ability that will develop, maybe with kids too, where they would not focus so much on the face, but like specifically the eyes, which is not covered?
Yes, but the problem is that it's a fragmented image. Yes. Because we should be more and more a person who guess, who adivinar, I don't know.
Yes, yeah, that's guess. To guess
what the other person is feeling or is watching. And it's more, we are prepared genetically to recognize the expression of some emotions, but without a mask. The new generation should learn how to recognize the emotional expression of the others with a mask, only looking at the eyes.
And yes,
and it will reinforce the problem of being worried about the face. For example, sometimes I say that the better business in the world is selling what is useless for problems without solution. So, for example, aging is a problem without solution. So you could be rich selling products anti-age.
Which they do.
Because it's a lie. It's a lie.
Placebos. These are placebos, and you put it on and you think it makes
you look younger. Maybe you will acquire a better image, but not less ages.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we can't escape that. Yeah, and I think these are just fascinating discussions, and it shows again that relationship between the mind and the body, and also our past with our present. So how the influence of the past, and as you're saying, as a child growing up, and they also use the sense of touch too as part of their communication, because learning of like touching things and putting things in their mouth and feeling it, and then moving on to the facial recognition. And one of the things that really fascinated me was a series called Lie to Me, which talks about nonverbal gestures and so on, body language that shows when a person is lying. And that's also facial expressions by Paul Ekman, who did the research on that. And it is fascinating because now I've been applying it to people when I see people on television, politicians are speaking, and I look for those signs. It's like, oh, this person is lying, and this person is not telling the truth, or even at work. And I think it's a superpower that we can gain by being more perceptive. And I'd like more people to investigate that, because that screen that we see, the facial expressions, are often deceiving. Many people are dishonest. And that would be a way of breaking that deception by having knowledge about deception and lies and so on.
The revival of the lies detector. Do you remember the machine that detects lying? But the point is not only the gestures or the face. For example, one thing that appears in first line caused by the COVID problem is the proximity. There is an anthropologist also who worked with the idea of nonverbal communication between human beings through the proximity. For example, he divided the proximity of people in 4 categories, and one is the public distance, the other is the intimate distance, the other is the work distance, and so on. The point is that caused by the pandemic, the proximity of people has changed, because you can't be so close and to others, even if you love them. So the closeness is modified. And returning to the skin, I studied in a research the alteration of the proximity values or the proximity conception among skin patients. Because when someone has a skin disease, the people automatically think that this is contagious. And as they fear the contagious, they take distance. And sometimes it's the own patient who maintain an excessive distance in order to not being rejected. Because if he or she are more close, the lesions or the problems in the skin will be more easily detected. So we all live with a sphere it's an imaginary sphere that expands or shrinks depending on the relationship that we are establishing at any time. But some people, caused by their disease, has a more expanded sphere of distances to the others, and some, on the contrary, look for closeness because they need touch.
Yeah, and it's also a cultural factor too, because I mean, Latin cultures, you usually go closer to others. And so I think it affects them even more because it's something that you used to do, but now you can't. Whereas in other cultures, it is okay. We always have distance.
Exactly.
And that touch, again, greeting each other with a touch or a kiss is not something that we practice as much. But one thing I do miss is hugs. And that is something that is becoming more difficult to do. And who knows how it will be. I remember 2 years ago when the pandemic started, researchers were saying, psychologists were saying, we'll see what impact it has on our behavior. But if it's only short term, if it's a few months, it won't have a lasting impact. But now it's been over 2 years and it's continuing. So I do believe it will have a lasting impact on our psyche, and that our children will also carry this into the future, for better or worse. But in this case, I think we will miss out on a lot of contact with others, and will become perfectly acceptable to have a distance with another person.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, for example, you know better than me, maybe, that, for example, the proximity measures or standards, they are not the same in Mexico than in USA, and they change because we are different cultures, no? Before ending, I would like to say something. I don't know if this is edited.
Sure, go
or
ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Because when you ask me about myself, I would like to say that I belong to the Argentine Psychoanalytic Association. In Spanish is Asociación Psicoanalítica Argentina, and I am professor at the at the University of Buenos Aires, in the psychology school and in the medicine school. And the Sigourney Award, probably they honored me with the prize. First, because I developed the utility, the appropriate place of psychoanalysis in the medical field, because I work at the hospital or in my office together with doctors that usually they don't work with psychoanalysts, only with psychiatrists. And it helps a lot millions of people, because as we told me at the beginning, when the dermatologist says you have to go to a psychotherapist, if the psychotherapist is only a psychiatrist, he will give you a medication. And these kind of patients don't want to take medications. They feel that medications will have adverse effects, or that he or she are treated as a psychiatric patient. Maybe they associate, no, this medication is taken by my Alzheimer grandmother or the depressive cousin that is very depressive. I am not. So psychoanalysts, usually we don't use medications because we take more time to be with the patient, interacting with them, and trying to listen the unconscious factors that intervene in the disease. And the second thing that maybe they considered in the Sigourney Award is that I teach at the university, so I train new generations of psychologists and doctors to work together. For example, my chair is with pupils of psychology that are ending their career. But in medicine, my chair is with pupils that are starting their career. So I do practice joining them together, discussing clinical cases. And in this way, I avoid the arrogancy that usually the students of medicine have, considering themselves superior to the psychology students, because the psychology students are ending their career, so they feel more comfortable with the ideas of psychology, and they have studied more. And the students of medicine are very young. They are not yet covered with the arrogancy or the superiority that usually doctors feel. So they interact in very spontaneous way, and it's a very, very good training for the students to work together from the completely different point of view and epistemology. Well, I wanted to say that.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, because you have also a lot of international contacts, and you do have an impact internationally as well. And this prize is it's a nonprofit organization that looks at international other countries as well. So maybe we can also mention, like, outside of Argentina, what are your influences across the world in various other countries as well?
Yes, I'm teaching. I started first teaching in some Latin American countries, but once I started to give all a section of psychosomatics in the Universidad Complutense de Madrid in Spain.
Yes, right.
And one Spanish colleague contacted me with a group that studied psychoanalytic psychosomatics in Moscow. And I've been teaching to psychoanalysts in Russia from 5 years, and still I give them supervisions, classes, courses. And then I belong to some societies, because there are a lot of local societies of psychodermatology. There is a Spanish one, a Japanese one. In the United States, there is an association of psychocutaneous medicine. There is one European Society for Dermatology and Psychiatry, and I was invited as a lecturer in these societies in different countries. So this in the field of psychodermatology. And as a psychoanalyst, I gave conferences and so on about the same subject, but towards psychoanalysts, not dermatologists. And this happened in Italy or in Sydney in Australia, or even in a World Congress of Dermatology. They did a symposium of psychodermatology in South Korea, and I was a representative of the psychodermatology in Latin America, and gave a lecture together with an European one, an Asian one, and one from each continent. Mm-hmm. It was a wonderful experience.
You're a man of
I learned a lot also. What?
A man of many hats. So you put on different hats, and then
yes.
I find it fascinating. Yes.
But I learned a lot because it opens your head, because you listen how they work in other continents or in other hospitals, or from different point of view. Usually they are not psychoanalysts. That's why in the Sigourney Award, they were so interested in my work, because I consider that I helped psychoanalysis to be promoted again in this field, in the medical field.
Mm-hmm. And it is absolutely useful. I mean, I had issues with blood pressure, and so I did not take medication, but using my own ideas, my own studies, my own work with myself, and using psychoanalysis, I have come to control that. And it is, again, in many ways, psychosomatic, as you would say. And so impressed my medical doctor, said, well, how did you do it? How did you achieve this? And I think that is important, that people know that, and to get rid of some of the preconceptions, these judgments that they have about psychoanalysis. And that's not just patients, that's also the doctors, medical doctors, that is also psychologists as well, and some people who frown on psychoanalysis. I think we should all embrace it because of all the benefits it brings to everyone. Exactly. And can bring. And also internationally, it's not just a specific group of people. Anyone can benefit from it.
Yes, and another prejudice is that is considering psychoanalysis only the 4 times a week in a couch, very expensive. No, but we have a psychoanalytic thoughts. That means a special way to elaborate, to think, to work through, to think about the human problems and diseases. And then having this tool, you can do different kinds of psychoanalytically oriented psychotherapies adapted to everyone. For example, with skin patients, I usually don't start with the couch, because they need to see, because they are swimming this channel all the time. Then they learn to have alternative channels to swim or to go through. And then, well, we decide if we continue with the couch or not. But considering always that emotions play an important role, that there are concepts that are very useful, for example, narcissism, unconscious, etc. And psychoanalysis Freud started inventing psychoanalysis, talking with, for example, with a woman when they were climbing a hill, a mountain, a short mountain, a hill, and talking while they were doing this kind of tourism. He interpreted her hysterical symptoms, and she got rid of them. She got rid of them.
Yeah, and the power of the unconscious too. And I see in CBT, they are moving a little bit in that direction of embracing some of these ideas, because the science has proven it. Neuroscience has proven that there is an element there that could be the unconscious, and that has a direct impact on how we live, how we think, how we feel, and the importance again of our past and of our childhood. And it opened my eyes to that, and it opened like many pathways. And that's why I'm not the same person when after now I've gone through all these changes, self-discovery that I've been through. And thank you so much for your wonderful work that you do. Thank you so much for your insights. A well-deserved congrats, and well-deserved recipient of the Sigourney Award. It's been fascinating to talk to you. We could talk for hours, but we need to end at some point. But thank you so much for being on my show. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you so much.